All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Me in this full room right now. No, so this is the first installment in the webinar series for the Quality of Life Innovations Program. Um, Let me just share my screen real quick to get the PowerPoint um, playing. And oops, gotta go to presentation mode. Excuse me. Here we go. So hopefully you all can see my screen. Um, just to introduce myself again, my name is Josiah Williams. I'm your program manager for the QLI. So I'm your go-to person for all questions you may have, any challenges you're facing throughout the school year with your projects. You can shoot me an email and I will be more than happy to help you out. Um, for example, the some of the supports that you get from Wise as you're going through this program is the webinar series. So like I said, this is the first installment in the webinar. Oh, so I'm just making sure my audio is working. Um, this is the first installment in the webinar. This is generating an idea. So this is the first step of your project. You are coming up with an idea, you are getting everything straight, trying to figure out how you can identify this problem, identify this issue, and then how you can conduct research and test it. So we're going to go through some methods and tips and advice for generating an idea in just a moment. Okay, so first of all, our agenda for this first webinar, I'm going to go over some important announcements. Then we're going to go into the funnel technique, which is really getting started. Generating an idea is the funnel technique, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail. You start broad. We're going to go through the self-assessment, brainstorm, UN 2030 goals, and using AI to just really help generate some thoughts and ideas for your projects. And then you get a little bit more specific. So a funnel, you start big and you get more specific at the bottom. For specificity, we're going to talk about the how-to, so some ways that you can further specify your topic using research, the 5 Ws, and then considering solutions. We were going to do a check-in, but I'll check in with myself at this point. And then we'll do a closeout and attendance. Just summarizing, but to start with some announcements. So first of all, we have a webinar prize, an incentive for you to participate, for you to join. You have to be students, you have to be present at the webinars live um, in order to participate in this prize. So at the end of the school year, we'll do a webinar raffle. Each time that you've attended a webinar in person, well, live, your name will be entered to win a $50 gift card. All right. Two winners will be selected. So there's a chance that you could be picked twice for this prize. Because every time you attend a webinar, your name gets put into that pot, right? So the more webinars that you attend, and we'll be tracking with attendance and so on, the better your chances are of winning these prizes. And it's a $50 gift card to wherever you would like. All right, so pretty big right there. Also, the second announcement I have, don't forget the QLI Student Resources Fair will be on December 3rd. It's a Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Students, your teachers have been informed about this. And if they haven't already, ask them for the parent consent form. Um, it's going to be at the UFT headquarters, 52 Broadway in Manhattan. So this will be a field trip day. You're going to get lunch. You're going to be able to talk to different experts working in these various fields related to mental health, related to public safety, related to criminal justice, sustainability, environmental impact. So all of these different organizations, these professionals will be at this event, willing and able to talk to you about your ideas and give you some more information about how the quality of life issues in New York City are currently being addressed, right? So now we're going to transition into the funnel technique. So with idea generating, I love this technique, the funnel technique. I use it when I conducted research myself. I even still use it to this day. It's a great way to hone in on exactly the point that you want to research, that you want to base your project on. So the general idea is like a funnel. You start broad, you have new ideas, you have grand ideas, and then through this process, you get a bit more specific, right? Because we have to be specific, we have to ask a very specific question in order to then develop a research plan. And so, for example, I've got two examples here. Let's say broadly, I want to do something on climate change, or I want to do something on mental health crisis, the mental health crisis. So those are very broad ideas. They can go in so many different directions. And so through this technique, the funnel technique, we get a little bit more specific. So with climate change, I could be like, what part of climate change? Maybe my next step down is climate change worsening hurricanes in mountainous regions. Okay, we just had a hurricane affecting North Carolina. So that's a great topical example. For the mental health crisis, maybe it could be depression impacting LGBTQ plus high school students, right? So these topics, if it's something you're passionate about, if it's affecting you personally, you can study that topic, right? A huge thing in research is having that personal connection, that personal impact driving your project, right? So what are a good question to ask yourself is what are certain things that affect me? What are certain things that affect my community, and what can I do um, to change them? The next step is here we go. So we get that's a little bit more specific. Now we get even more specific at the bottom. So for climate change, we started at the top climate change worsening hurricanes, getting a little bit specific. Maybe you're reading the news. Now we get even more specific. Response times of government agencies during Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. Now this is something I can study, something I can collect data on. I can look at news reports. I can look at government reports, and I can look at the response time and compare them between these government organizations. So it's a very specific topic. And maybe my hypothesis is, well, this agency is faster versus this agency, but I can conduct data on that and I can collect data on that. For mental health, we started mental health crisis, depression impacting LGBTQ plus high school students. Now we get even more specific rates of bullying among LGBTQ plus high school students. Students in high schools. This I can collect data on. I could do survey research and survey peers, um, and collect some of that data and look at the rates of bullying. Maybe we can compare LGBTQ plus students versus non-LGBTQ plus students. But this is something that I can definitely collect data on. And so that's the idea with the funnel technique is you start really broad and you ask yourself more questions, you chip away at that broad topic till you get to the bottom. So starting with a broad topic, how do we generate thoughts? How do we generate ideas? Where do thoughts come from, right? Um, so there are a couple ways that you could do this. You could start with the self-assessment. So I kind of mentioned this earlier. What's something you care about? What's something you're passionate about? What's something that affects you personally? Um, Another thing could be, oops, have you observed something and thought, this needs to change, or this needs to be fixed, or there's a better way to do this. That's a great starting point. Um, what about what angers you? Is there something that's just so frustrating? You're like, why is this here? Why is this done this way? And how can you make it better? That's another great starting off point. What are you curious about? Just what are things that you're thinking about as you're going through your day-to-day life, walking through the halls of your high school? What are things you're noticing? Think about like for the self-assessment using your senses, right? Um, and then lastly, what kinds of experiences or issues have you, your family, friends, or others had? So this is really thinking about your community. And this goes into really the next one, brainstorming, but thinking about your community, what are issues affecting you, affecting your family, affecting your friends? You can gather ideas by talking with your friends, talking with your neighbors, your teachers, your family. Um, what are the school clubs thinking about? The Student Government Association, what are they thinking about? What are some issues affecting your school community? You can also so this is a really great resource, something you all should look up. The United Nations 2030 goals. This is a great starting point for this project. And if you're thinking about sustainability, if you're thinking about a larger global community on that global scale, starting here is incredible because the United Nations came up with 17 different areas that they're focused on bettering by 2030, their goals for 2030. The first six, poverty, hunger, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation. You could take these topics and maybe apply them to a different community. Maybe think about them in terms of New York City. So what does poverty look like in New York City? Why, what are some of the causes of poverty, of childhood poverty? What about hunger? How does that look in New York City? How does that look in your neighborhood? Um, Health and well-being, mental health, thinking about this, quality education. You're all in school, so what is a quality education? That's a really interesting question. The next area is affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure. You talk about North Carolina. That's where I'm from. The hurricane, I have family that lived in the mountains of North Carolina. Their homes were ripped away, just floated down the mountain because the infrastructure is not there. It was actually really scary. They're safe, they were able to get out, but um, all of the roads, like my family, there was one road to get them out of the town, completely destroyed. They were trapped. So they had to like go through side roads and dirt roads and off-roading to get out and get to safety because they had no food, they had no water, they had no electricity. Um, their cell phones were not working. Imagine that. Uh, Natural disaster goes by, your shelter, your food, your water is all threatened, and you have no way to communicate with anybody. Um, Wild, apocalyptic. Anyway, reduced inequalities is number 10. Sustainable cities and communities. This is something you could think about with New York. What does that mean? What does sustainability mean for the city? And then responsible consumption and production. So again, thinking about sustainability during the whole process of production and consumerism. Areas 13 through 17, you've got climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and then partnerships for the goals. So you could look at for these just biodiversity. So wildlife, how is how is traffic and exhaust affecting wildlife in New York? Of course, that's a little broad. We'd have to specify, but these are great starting points for your project, great jumping off points. Another one that I really like to talk about is using AI. So ChatGPT. It's a great way to come up with ideas. Now, of course, ChatGPT is not good for writing, and we have software that checks for AI writing for your proposals. So be warned. Um, but for idea generating, it synthesizes so much information. So I did this Google search or ChatGPT search. What are some of the quality of life issues affecting my community, New York City? And it gives me 10, a list of 10. Um, and it goes down the line, affordable housing, clean water, boom, public safety, boom, 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 boom. If you're struggling with coming up with just a broad general idea, this is a great tool to use to help you get started, to help you get the ball rolling. But don't use it to write your proposal. So to continue on, we've got further specify your topic. So now we're getting even closer to the end or to the bottom of the funnel. So some ways to specify your topic, and you can see it here at the top right. I've kind of highlighted where we're at in the process of the funnel technique. Now we're kind of at the bottom. The issue that you're working on has to be narrow and focused. The reason for that is because you cannot conduct research on something that's so broad. It's going to be really difficult if your topic is the mental health crisis. All right, how are you going to research that? There are so many different directions you can turn to, and it's something you cannot accomplish in one school year. So that's why we have to specify, we have to narrow and focus our ideas. So another example than the climate change and mental health that I gave earlier. So a general topic would be transportation problems in New York City. Very broad because how many different types of transportation do we have? Bikes, trains, cars, shuttles, buses, scooters, walking, pedestrians. Specific issue. Also, how many different areas do we have in New York? You've got the Bronx bus, you've got the Brooklyn bus, you've got the Manhattan buses, you've got the Manhattan Queens bus. So many different um, so many different things that you could focus on. A more specific issue would be additional bus service in Brooklyn during rush hour. This is something that you can look at data and conduct research on. So you could look at um, uh, what is traffic congestion like in Brooklyn? I think this is still broad. I would specify a neighborhood in Brooklyn. Maybe you want to look at Crown Heights. Maybe you want to look at Bed-Stuy. Um, so we can even specify a little bit further. Another one, so this type, you're specifying the problem. So we started transportation, and now you're looking at bus services. Another way to specify is based on location. So you have a general topic, too much litter in cities. All right, sure. Now a more specific based on location, too much litter in my neighborhood. I would ask, what's your neighborhood? Hamilton Heights, Washington Heights, Chelsea, Financial District, uh, Bed-Stuy, Riverdale. What neighborhood are you talking about? Specify based on location. But these are two ways to do it. So you could specify problem or specify location. Um, Great ways to do it. You can also use research to specify your topic. So these are some incredible websites to go to just learn more about a general topic. The issue lab in particular, you can pull it up on your own. It's just www.issuelab.org. You type in your general ideas and they'll populate they'll populate articles and um, things that you could read about that issue. So it just further specifies, and maybe it'll lead you down this trail or down this path. And you're like, you just type in climate change and it brings up different forms of wildlife. It brings up natural disasters. You're like, oh, I didn't think about natural disasters. Let me go down this road. And then it's natural disasters and coastal cities, natural disasters in mountainous regions. And you're like, okay, let me go here, let me go here. So it's a great way to really find your niche, right? That's a great one. And you could just do a Google search, right? Google is great. Knowing what to search is the problem. So searching your topic and seeing what is already out there, is a great way to further specify your topic, right? Again, we've got the five W's. Um, that you can ask yourself as you're going through. First of all, who is affected by this issue, right? So if you have a general topic, I'm just going to go with climate change again. Who is affected by this issue? What community do you want to look at? You could look at lower income people. You could look at wildlife, biodiversity. The second question, what is the primary reason this issue exists? So that could take you on a whole trail. Climate change, you could look at the greenhouse effect. You could look at man-made problems. You could look at the lack of regulation. So many different areas, but we're further specifying, right? So it's not just climate change, it's climate change and the greenhouse effect now. The third question, where did this issue arise? Or where else does it currently exist? So this is doing some background research, really helping you understand the context of the problem, right? The fourth question is when? When did this issue become a problem? When did it really start affecting things? So with climate change, when did climate change get even worse? And that's a progression. You see a lot of charts on that, but with my other example of mental depression rates in LGBTQ plus youth, you could look at when did this become a problem? You could look at the history of legislation. You could look at the history of culture in the United States. And again, we got to specify location. You could look at the United States, or you could look in England. There's so many different areas and ways to specify. Anyway, I'm going on a rabbit trail. The fifth W is why is the issue a problem? This is really important. Why should you study it? Why should you, or why are you interested? Why do you want to fix it? Why do you want to solve it? That's what you're answering with this question, right? And it's a great way to hone in on what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because if you don't know why you're there, if you don't have a reason for why you're doing these things, then you're going to lose sight of the entire project, right? And so the last one, there are five W's and one H. The last one is how can you do anything about it? All right, now we're getting into solution focus, solution mindset. How can you do anything about it? Because it's one thing to have a problem that you want to study. The second part of this is what is the solution? How are you going to address it? And how are you going to implement that solution, right? So we have to think, you start at the beginning with the end in mind. You want the whole project in your head sight. Um, so the five W's and how can you do anything about it? Is there a potential solution? These are all really important questions to ask yourself, to talk to your mentors about, to talk to your educators, to talk to your advisors about these questions. Go to them. You can also come to me, shoot me an email and say, Josiah, I've got this topic right here. I'm thinking about the climate crisis and how we currently educate it, but I'm having trouble specifying. I'm thinking in this direction, or I'm thinking about these things, but I'm not really sure. And talk to the people around you who are here to support you and support your proposal. Here's a really good tip. Keep a record of your findings because as you're going through this process, you're finding sources and you're finding background information. It'll be it's a really good idea to keep track of all of these websites and everything because you have to have at least 8 sources for a proposal. So keeping them in a document, keeping them, storing them on your web browser, really good idea. Really good idea. Great organization as well. Uh, Now, again, kind of with the how question, how can I do anything about it? Considering your solutions, thinking with the end in mind, because the end goal of this project is to, after you've done your research, come up with an innovative solution, implement your solution, right? The best proposals and the best projects will have an implementation section. Now, if you're doing an issue brief, you don't have to implement, you just have to come up with a plan of implementation, right? So considering solutions it's great to get started now, right? So if your topic is uh, response time of government agencies in North Carolina to natural disasters. What's a solution we could have? Maybe a more robust or a more streamlined communication system. If this agency is taking longer than this one, but they're both equally important, maybe they're not communicating. So thinking in that way. And again, your teachers, your advisors, me, we're all here to help you and to help you think through these questions if you feel a bit lost. Okay, I was gonna do a check-in, but um, I'll check in with myself. How am I doing? I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. Um, all right, another announcement. The Resources Fair is on Tuesday, December 3rd from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the UFT headquarters. It's 52 Broadway, Manhattan, New York. Make sure that your school is registered. Teachers, advisors, and students, make sure you're registered. Students, I will be sending out an interest form to your teachers. They will put it up on your Google Classrooms and elsewhere for you to sign. You have to register, students. You have to complete this interest form in order to be placed into sessions, right? So the deadline for this will be in, I believe, 3 weeks on a Friday, so that we can get you placed ahead of time. Excuse me. So to close out, I've got 2 QR codes. The first one is the attendance, which nobody showed up, so nobody better fill it out because nobody's getting counted for the prize. The second one is the interest form. This one is much more important if you're watching this back after November 12th. Um, Fill out the interest form. It's very important, again, to make sure that you get counted for the resources fair and you can get the sessions that you want. You can get into the sessions you want to get into. Okay. Um, so make sure you scan that with your phone and fill it out before Friday in a few weeks, as we'll be programming. And that is it. So this was a lot of information um, about I'm just going to go back to the very beginning. a lot of information about the funnel technique. Okay. With generating an idea, that's this technique is so useful. Start broad and then ask yourself more questions to further specify. So ask yourself, who is affected? What is the reason? Where is this happening? So you're specifying the problem and the location because you really want to get to a question, you want to get to an issue that is able to be researched. Okay. Um, you make it easier for yourself by coming up with a very specific, precise question that's easier to develop a research plan than a general question that we gotta work even harder on later down the line to figure out a research plan. All right. Um, so be thinking about these questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And if you need any help, again, go to your teachers, go to your mentors. And of course, you can always um, shoot me an email if you need anything as well. I'm trying to go back to my email, which was on the first slide. Oh, nope, it was not on the first slide. My name is Josiah Williams. It's just jwilliams at wise-ny.org. All right, and I hope to see more of you at our second webinar. Oh, thank you and good night.